The most anticipated day for all young wolves in the Silverwood Pack was the mating ceremony, a day of hope and dreams, a vibrant celebration woven into the very fabric of their existence. For generations, this sacred ritual had marked the transition from solitary youth to bonded partnership, a time when destined mates found each other through scent and soul. But for Lyra, an unassuming Omega wolf, it was not destined to be a day of joyous union, but rather a public humiliation that would forever change her fate, casting a long shadow over her quiet life and forcing her onto a path she never imagined. She wished with every fiber of her being that this year things might be different, that the universe might finally smile upon her. Lyra herself was small and often overlooked, a wisp of a wolf with fur the color of twilight shadows and eyes that held a depth of kindness most failed to notice. She was an Omega, and in the Silverwood Pack that meant a life lived on the fringes, always subservient, always striving for acceptance that rarely came. Her days were filled with the most menial chores, mending torn pelts, gathering roots, or tending to the younger pups while their mothers hunted. Despite her gentle nature and a spirit that yearned for connection, she lived in a quiet solitude, a constant hum of loneliness accompanying her every step. Yet, deep within her heart, beneath layers of forced resignation, she harbored a secret dream: to find a true mate, a kindred spirit who would see past her low status and recognize the worth she held within. A mate who would choose her not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection and respect. Sometimes, in her private moments, she even dared to dream of Damon, the alpha's son, whose strong presence and confident stride she secretly admired from afar. It was a foolish, naive hope, but one she clung to with a desperate tenderness. The mating ceremony finally arrived, a kaleidoscope of excited chatter and the rich, earthy scent of hundreds of wolves converging. Lyra, her heart a flutter of nerves and a tiny persistent spark of hope, joined the throng. She knew her chances were slim, practically non-existent, but a part of her couldn't help but wish. The air crackled with anticipation as the scenting ritual began. One by one, eligible wolves stepped forward, their scents mingling in the crisp autumn air. A rush of recognition, a nudge of noses, and then the happy howls of newly bonded pairs echoed through the clearing. Lyra watched, a pang of longing twisting in her gut, as friends and acquaintances found their matches, their faces alight with joy. Each successful pairing chipped away at her fragile optimism, yet she maintained a quiet dignity, knowing her turn would come, and with it, perhaps, a moment of unexpected grace. She closed her eyes for a brief second, offering a silent prayer to the ancestors, asking for just one chance at happiness. The sounds of the ceremony continued, a symphony of hope and belonging that, for Lyra, felt increasingly distant and unobtainable. The scent of pine and damp earth filled her nostrils, a comforting presence amidst the overwhelming emotions. Before we dive deeper into Lyra's heartbreaking journey and witness the trials she must overcome, please hit that subscribe button and join our pack for more captivating stories. Your support helps us bring these tales to life, allowing us to share more narratives of resilience, love, and unexpected triumphs. We're building a community here, and we'd love for you to be a part of it. Lyra, her heart thrumming like a trapped bird, finally stepped forward for her turn at the scenting circle. The eyes of the entire pack seemed to converge on her, a mixture of mild curiosity and outright indifference. Her palms were clammy, a cold dread mixing with the faintest flicker of hope. This was it, the moment that could define her future. From the edge of the circle, her secret crush, Damon the alpha's son, began to approach. For a fleeting, breathless moment, Lyra's world narrowed to just him, his powerful gait, the confident set of his jaw. A wild, foolish thought dared to bloom in her chest. Could it be? Could he, the majestic son of their leader, possibly choose her? The corners of her lips curved upwards almost imperceptibly, a silent prayer of gratitude already forming. But then Damon reached her. He circled her once, his nose twitching. Instead of the gentle sniff of consideration, a deep frown creased his brow. His movements were not tentative or respectful, but rather disdainful, almost aggressive. He sniffed once more deeply, then recoiled visibly, a sneer twisting his handsome features. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers, followed by hushed whispers. Damon's voice, loud and clear, cut through the silence like a sharp blade. "Her scent is weak," he declared, his tone laced with disgust. "Barely there." And what is there smells like stale herbs and dirt. You are not worthy of a mate, Omega. You are unworthy of me. He finished, his eyes raking over her small frame with undisguised contempt, solidifying his rejection with a final, dismissive sniff before turning his back. The fragile hope within Lyra shattered into a million tiny pieces, each shard piercing her soul. The public shaming was brutal, far worse than anything she had ever imagined. The snickers and whispers started immediately, growing louder, more mocking. Faces that had held mild curiosity now openly jeered. Lyra felt her cheeks burn with shame, a crimson flush spreading across her neck. Her eyes welled with tears, blurring the faces of her tormentors, transforming them into a grotesque, mocking mass. Damon's words echoed in her ears, crushing her spirit beneath their weight. He represented not just personal cruelty, but the pack's rigid, unfeeling social hierarchy, a system designed to keep her firmly in her place. His rejection wasn't just a refusal. It was a public execution of her dreams, a declaration to the entire Silverwood pack that she was nothing, a burden, a stain on their pristine ceremony. She tried to hold back the torrent of tears, to gather what little dignity she had left, but the sheer force of the pack's derision was overwhelming. The snickers transformed into outright laughter, punctuated by cruel comments about her pathetic nature. Lyra desperately wanted to disappear, to melt into the forest floor. She began to back away, hoping to slip away unnoticed, to find some dark corner where she could weep in peace and lick her wounds away from the judgmental eyes. But as she turned to flee, a stern voice boomed across the clearing, freezing her in place. It was the Alpha, Damon's father, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over her humiliated form. "Hold, Omega," he commanded, his voice devoid of warmth echoing his son's disdain. "You will not slink away like a coward." Lyra froze, her heart plummeting further into despair. This was it. The Alpha's public declaration was the final nail in the coffin of her existence within the pack. "This Omega," he announced to the silent, watching pack, his gaze piercing Lyra, "has proven herself unmatchable. A burden on our pack, contributing nothing but weakness to our lineage. No wolf of Silverwood will ever claim her as kin." The Alpha's words hung heavy in the air, a final definitive judgment. Lyra's legs trembled, threatening to give out beneath her. The humiliation was complete, absolute, and utterly soul-crushing. She stood there, exposed and broken, the weight of the Alpha's decree sealing her fate as an eternal outcast. The Alpha's decree, delivered with such chilling finality, marked Lyra as an eternal Omega, a ghost within her own pack. It was a pronouncement that she would never truly belong, never share the warmth of a family, never experience the fierce loyalty of a mate within the Silverwood pack's rigid confines. Her fate was sealed, not just for the day, but for every sunrise that followed. The pack once again fell into a hush, but this time it was a silence filled with a different kind of judgment, a cold, unwavering condemnation. No longer merely unchosen, Lyra was now officially unclaimable, stripped of even the meager duties she had once performed. Her simple tasks of mending pelts or watching pups, once her solace, were now deemed too significant for her disgraced status. Instead, she was relegated to the most undesirable chores, the dirty work nobody else wanted, cleaning out the dens of sick wolves, hauling away refuse from the communal meals, gathering the most noxious wildflowers for medicinal poultices. These new assignments were not merely tasks, they were symbolic punishments, designed to further isolate her, to remind her and everyone else of her insignificance, pushing her even further onto the margins of their community. Each day was a fresh wound, a constant reminder of the public shaming she had endured. Lyra retreated, not just physically to the outskirts of the pack lands, but deep within herself. Her spirit, once a gentle flicker, felt utterly crushed, bruised and battered beyond recognition. The vibrant world around her seemed muted, her senses dulled by the constant ache in her chest. She wandered the edges of their territory, a lone figure, her reflection in still puddles showing only a hollow-eyed wolf whose youth had been stolen. She questioned everything, her worth as a wolf, her very place in the intricate tapestry of the world, whether she would ever find even a fleeting moment of happiness or acceptance again. The memories of Damon's cutting words, the Alpha's cold decree, and the pack's scorn played on an endless loop in her mind, a tormenting symphony that denied her any peace. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the relentless pain of rejection began to transform. It festered, then hardened, evolving into a quiet, stubborn resolve. If her pack would not have her, she would survive. If they deemed her unworthy of their love, she would find a way to thrive, even if it meant doing it completely alone, divorced from the warmth of the pack she'd always craved. This new steely determination became her shield, a fragile but growing inner strength that propelled her forward, one painful step at a time. In her profound loneliness, exiled to the forgotten corners of the forest, Lyra began to truly see her surroundings. The forced solitude, which had initially been excruciating, gradually became a strange kind of freedom. With no pack duties to adhere to, no demanding alphas or snickering peers to appease, she spent countless hours observing, learning, and immersing herself in the natural world. She discovered a hidden talent, an innate connection to the ancient rhythm of the forest. Guided by instinct and a thirst for knowledge, she began foraging for rare herbs, identifying their specific properties, and understanding the delicate balance of the ecosystem. These were the old ways, the secrets of survival and healing long forgotten by the modern, arrogant Silverwood pack, who had grown complacent in their supposed superiority. She learned which roots could staunch bleeding, which berries could ease a fever, and which leaves could soothe troubled sleep. This newfound knowledge provided her with a small, but incredibly vital measure of purpose. It was a purpose entirely outside the pack's judgment, a defiant act of self-sufficiency that slowly, steadily, began to mend the raw wounds of her soul. She was still Lyra, the Omega, but now she was Lyra, the silent keeper of ancient wisdom, a strength burgeoning within her that none, especially not the Silverwood pack, could ever take away. Far away beyond the familiar hunting grounds of the Silverwood pack, in the rugged, untamed wilderness that stretched for countless miles, an exiled alpha named Kale journeyed. Whispers carried on the wind, stories told by solitary wanderers and nervous traveling packs, reached his ears, tales of a pack that had lost its way, its leadership weak, its values corrupted by arrogance and a disregard for their ancient traditions. Kale listened, his powerful frame often still, his golden eyes filled with a deep, thoughtful intensity as he processed each fragment of information. He was a wolf forged in a different kind of crucible, a leader whose strength lay not just in his formidable physical presence, but in his unwavering moral compass. He had once been a respected leader, a beacon of justice within his own domain, revered by those under his charge. But years ago, his steadfast belief in fairness and protection for all pack members, especially the weakest and most vulnerable, had put him at odds with the powerful, unyielding alpha of the Silverwood pack. His challenge on matters of justice, a desperate plea for a more equitable way, had not been met with understanding, but with swift, brutal banishment. Kale's exile had been unjust, a painful severance from the wolves he had sworn to protect. Yet, even in his solitude, the welfare of the Silverwood pack, his ancestral home, remained a heavy weight on his spirit. He felt a deep, abiding responsibility to the wolves he once led, connection that time and distance could not sever. The rumors of their decline, their growing disconnect from the true spirit of pack life, gnawed at him. He knew with a certainty that resonated deep in his bones, that his banishment had been a symptom of the very corruption now consuming them. He had challenged the alpha not for power, but for principle, for the very soul of their community. Now the consequences of that flawed leadership were becoming undeniable. He knew he could not stand by indefinitely while his former pack suffered. He began to plan his return not as a conqueror, but as an observer, a silent sentinel seeking to understand the true depth of their current predicament. He needed to see with his own eyes the extent of the decay, to gauge whether his intervention, after all these years, could still make a difference. His journey was long, fraught with perils and the constant vigilance required of a lone alpha traveling through contested territories. Yet his resolve remained unshaken. Every step he took was a conscious movement towards a past he had been forced to abandon, and a future he felt compelled to shape. While Lyra, the humbled Omega, struggled with her new solitary reality, slowly forging a silent strength from the ashes of her public humiliation, Kale began his own arduous journey. His path led him ever closer to his former lands, to the heart of the Silverwood territory he had been forbidden to tread. He was completely unaware, as he traversed mountain ranges and crossed rushing rivers, of the profound destiny-altering connection he would soon form with a seemingly insignificant Omega wolf. Their paths, divergent for so long, were now inexorably converging, driven by unseen forces and the subtle hand of fate. Lyra, scarred but not broken, was learning to thrive in the margins, her spirit hardening with each passing day. Cale, seasoned by exile and unwavering in his principles, was returning to reclaim a legacy that had been unjustly denied. Neither knew the other existed in any meaningful way, yet their stories were already beginning to intertwine, threads of destiny weaving together for an encounter that would shake the Silverwood Pack to its very core. The vast forest held its breath, awaiting the inevitable collision of their separate worlds. Months stretched into a full year, then another, and Lyra, though still an outcast in the Silverwood Pack's harsh estimation, had undergone a profound transformation. The fragile, heartbroken Omega who had endured public shaming was gone, replaced by a wolf tempered by solitude and self-reliance. Her knowledge of the forest, once a mere distraction, had blossomed into an essential life-sustaining skill. She moved through the ancient woods with a quiet confidence, her senses alive to every rustle of leaves, every scent carried on the breeze. She no longer merely gathered herbs, she understood the intricate ecosystem, reading the signs of the seasons, anticipating the needs of the land. She was entirely self-sufficient, her small den on the very fringes of the pack territory a testament to her ingenuity and tireless effort. Her spirit, though permanently scarred by the wounds of rejection, was no longer broken. The constant ache of loneliness had subsided, replaced by a quiet strength, a fierce independence that shone in her eyes. She actively avoided the main pack, finding solace and a deep, resonant peace in the embrace of nature, her true mentor and companion. The Whispering Pines understood her better than any wolf in the Silverwood. Meanwhile, Cale, the exiled alpha, arrived covertly at the Silverwood Pack's distant borders, a shadow moving through the night. He was careful, methodical, his years of lone travel honing his stealth to an art. He spent weeks observing, a silent ghost tracking the movements and activities of his former pack. He watched their hunting parties, noting their declining efficiency, their sloppy techniques. He listened to their howls at night, discerning the subtle shifts in their communal calls, the underlying tension and disunity. He saw the changes that had occurred since his unjust exile, a creeping arrogance in their leaders, a growing disregard for the natural order, a blatant disrespect for the ancient traditions that once bound them. The once proud Silverwood Pack showed subtle, yet undeniable signs of decay within its very structure. Their once clean territory was littered in places, their patrols less vigilant. The rigid hierarchy had become a breeding ground for entitlement, fostering a blindness to their own weakening foundations. He saw pups growing up with less discipline, young wolves who had never learned true humility or the delicate balance of their forest home, having only known the false strength of their current alpha's reign. The spirit of the pack, once vibrant and cohesive, was slowly unraveling. During one such evening reconnaissance, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, Cale was positioned on a high ridge overlooking a particularly dense section of the forest's edge. He watched, his keen alpha senses attuned to every movement, when a small solitary figure emerged from the deepening shadows. It was Lyra, her small frame laden with a basket woven from reeds and vines, meticulously gathering night-blooming herbs in the fading light. Cale felt a jolt of intrigue. She moved with an innate grace, a knowing stillness that spoke of a deep connection to her surroundings. Her scent, subtle and complex, a blend of damp earth, wild mint, and something else, a quiet resilience, an untamed spirit, drifted up to him. It was a scent unlike any he had encountered within the pack's main territory, untainted by the dominant, often cloying, musk of power and status. He focused on her, his golden eyes narrowed in contemplation. He didn't yet know her story, the public humiliation she had faced, or the quiet strength she had forged from it, but something about her captivated his attention. This small wolf, an outcast by the pack's measure, held a unique aura, a quiet dignity that resonated deeply within him, sparking a flicker of curiosity he hadn't felt in years. He knew instinctively that this encounter, however fleeting, was significant. He watched her until she disappeared back into the shadows, a faint imprint of her unique presence lingering in the twilight air. One day, as Lyra ventured deeper into the ancient, whispering woods, far from the pack's well-trodden paths to gather some rare silverleaf, a plant vital for a potent fever reducer, she found herself in grave danger. A guttural snarl ripped through the quiet solitude, sending shivers down her spine. A rogue wolf, larger and far more aggressive than any she had encountered, lunged from the undergrowth. This was the kind of threat that the Silverwood pack, in its functioning state, would have swiftly neutralized, securing its borders and protecting its members. However, the current alpha's negligence meant the edges of their territory were often porous, undefended. Lyra, though resilient, was no warrior. Her strength lay in her knowledge and quiet perseverance, not in combat. She scrambled, trying to evade the snarling beast, but it was relentless, its eyes burning with hunger and malice. Just as she braced for the inevitable, a powerful dark blur slammed into the rogue. Kale, who had been shadowing her movements from a distance, observing her quiet grace, intervened with swift, decisive force. His movements were a blur of coordinated power, a dance of deadly precision. The rogue, taken completely by surprise by the sheer ferocity of the attack, yelped in pain and quickly retreated, vanishing back into the shadows of the forest, its aggression quelled by the unquestionable dominance of the unknown alpha. Lyra, trembling and breathless, watched the encounter unfold, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was initially terrified of the powerful unfamiliar alpha who now stood over her, his golden eyes piercing, his stance radiating an intimidating strength. She crouched low, instinctively showing submission to a wolf of such immense presence. But Kale's demeanor, though firm and undeniably dominant, held an undercurrent of protective concern. He was not aggressive towards her, merely intense. He lowered his head slightly, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "You are far from the safety of the main pack alone," he stated, his voice a low rumble, resonating with authority. Why would an Omega risk such open danger? Lyra hesitated, her gaze flicking between him and the spot where the rogue had disappeared. The memory of her humiliation flashed through her mind, the Alpha's decree, Damon's cruel words. But something in Kale's eyes, a genuine question without judgment, encouraged her. Slowly, hesitantly, she began to explain her circumstances, her words quiet but steady. She spoke of her need for specific herbs found only in this remote area, her role in gathering them, and the fact that she was, in essence, an outcast, not expected to abide by the pack's main territory boundaries anyway. She omitted the specifics of her public shaming, only hinting at her marginalized status, but the underlying pain was palpable in her tone. As Lyra spoke, Kale listened intently, an understanding dawning within him. He recognized the quiet strength in her voice, the resilience in her posture despite her obvious fear. He realized Lyra was one of the very wolves he had been exiled for trying to protect, a victim of the Silverwood pack's decaying moral compass and the leadership that valued dominance over empathy. Her vulnerability, coupled with her quiet resolve, stirred something deep within him, a protective instinct he hadn't felt so strongly in years. He saw not just an Omega, but a survivor, a wolf who had found strength in adversity. He knew with an undeniable certainty that her story was not just her own. It was a symptom of the pack's deepening corruption, a clear sign that the Silverwood pack had lost its way. The incident with the rogue and Lyra's isolated presence confirmed his deepest fears about the pack's negligence and disregard for its most vulnerable members. He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time, and a quiet resolve hardened in his own heart. He would protect her, and by doing so, he would begin to reclaim what was truly his. Over the next few weeks, Kale continued his methodical observations of the Silverwood pack, maintaining his hidden vantage points, gathering irrefutable proof of their decline. However, his focus was no longer solely on the pack as a whole. A significant portion of his time was now dedicated to seeking out Lyra. He would often find her near the forest's edge, seemingly drawn to her quiet presence and the gentle hum of her spirit. During these prolonged, often silent encounters, he learned more about her, piecing together the fragmented story of her life. He listened intently as she, little by little, hesitantly at first, began to confide in him, sharing the painful details of her public humiliation at the mating ceremony, the raw wound of Damon's cruel rejection and the Alpha's subsequent, dehumanizing decree, poured out of her, sometimes in a rush of words, other times in quiet, trembling admissions. Cale absorbed every detail, his heart aching with a profound understanding, a deep respect for the strength it took for her to survive such an ordeal. Lyra, in turn, found herself opening up to Cale in ways she never thought possible. His presence, stoic yet undeniably kind, offered a sense of safety and understanding she had never experienced. There was no judgment in his golden eyes, only a quiet, unwavering acceptance that healed a small part of her shattered soul with every shared moment. Cale found himself increasingly drawn to Lyra, not just by a sense of protectiveness, but by a growing, undeniable affection. He admired her quiet strength, a core of resilience that had allowed her to not only survive, but to build a solitary existence despite immense adversity. Her compassionate heart, evident in the gentle way she tended to injured forest creatures or spoke of the hidden wisdom of the ancient trees, resonated deeply within him. He saw in her a profound connection to the natural world, an intuitive understanding of the forest that transcended mere foraging. Lyra was a wolf untainted by the pack's arrogance, unburdened by their superficial concerns of status and power. She embodied the purest spirit of a wolf, resilient, resourceful, and deeply connected to her environment. His initial protective instincts, born from a sense of justice, deepened into something far more profound, an emotional tether that began to bind them together. He found himself thinking of her even when they were apart, a subtle yearning to be near her, to ensure her well-being, that surprised him with its intensity. As Cale spent more time observing the Silverwood pack, his initial concerns evolved into a stark realization of their imminent collapse. The internal strife, once subtle undercurrents, had become overt squabbles, fracturing the pack's once unified front. He noticed their dwindling hunting reserves, a clear sign of poor leadership and a lack of foresight. The Alpha and Daemon, too focused on maintaining their positions through intimidation, had failed to guide the pack effectively, neglecting essential long-term planning. Their borders were increasingly vulnerable, allowing rogue wolves and other dangers to creep closer, posing a threat to their survival that went largely unaddressed. He saw a pervasive sense of malaise settling over the pack, a slow decay that was eating away at their spirit and their very ability to function as a cohesive unit. It became painfully clear to Cale that the Silverwood pack was slowly, inexorably, destroying itself from within, a direct consequence of the very corruption he had once fought against. His return was no longer just about justice or protecting Lyra. It was about saving his ancestral pack from its own self-inflicted demise. The urgency of his mission solidified with every passing day. Lyra began to notice Cale's scent with an intensity that transcended mere recognition. It was a powerful, comforting aroma, unlike anything she had ever encountered, a primal signature that resonated deep within her very being. It was the scent of ancient forests, of raw power held in check by profound calm, and something else indescribable, a familiar solace that spoke directly to her soul. She felt an undeniable pull, a magnetic force that drew her closer to him, a sense of belonging that resonated deeply throughout her entire body and spirit, a sensation she had never experienced in her tumultuous life within the Silverwood pack. There was no artifice, no pretense in Cale's presence, only an unwavering strength that encompassed her. It was as if her wolf, long dormant and suppressed by years of humiliation, was finally awakening, stretching and unfurling towards its natural home. This was not just attraction. It was an instinctual recognition, a deep-seated knowing that vibrated through every fiber of her being. Cale, too, recognized the undeniable scent of his true mate emanating from Lyra. It was a revelation, a profound understanding that settled over him with a quiet, powerful certainty. Her unique aroma, that delicate blend of earth, resilience, and an untouched purity, now carried the unmistakable undertones of destiny, of a bond decreed by the universe itself. The connection that had begun as protective instinct and deepened through shared vulnerability, now blossomed into something complete, utterly undeniable. The moment of realization was silent, but incredibly profound for both of them. No words were exchanged, none were necessary. Their eyes met, holding a depth of understanding that transcended language, a silent acknowledgement of the powerful, ancient bond that had just ignited between them. Both Cale and Lyra understood the immense depth of their connection, a bond forged not by conventional mating ceremonies, not by an artificial performance, but by shared hardship, mutual respect, and a deep intuitive recognition of one another's true spirit. Kale, gazing at the small yet infinitely strong Omega before him, internally swore a powerful, unwavering vow. He would protect her with every fiber of his being, and he would reclaim his rightful place not just for himself, but for Lyra, his mate, and for the entire ailing Silverwood pack. A new determination, sharp and focused, settled within Kale. He knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that he could no longer stand idly by, observing the accelerating decline of his ancestral pack. The Silverwood pack needed strong, just leadership, a guiding hand that prioritized the welfare of all its members, not just the powerful few. He envisioned a future where Lyra's compassionate influence, her innate connection to the natural world, and her hard-won wisdom would not just be valued, but would be absolutely vital in rebuilding the pack, in healing the deep wounds of injustice and neglect. Her spirit, so long suppressed, would be the balm the pack desperately needed. His plan began to take precise shape in his mind, meticulous and unyielding. He would orchestrate his re-entry, not as a desperate, vengeful exile returning to punish, but as a rightful leader asserting his domain, a leader armed with a vision for true unity and prosperity. The time for subtle observation was over. The time for decisive action had arrived. Every strategic move, every carefully considered step would be aimed at two goals: reinstating true justice within the Silverwood pack, and by doing so ensuring Lyra's rightful place by his side, not just as his mate, but as their revered Luna. He would return, and the Silverwood pack, from the lowest Omega to the highest-ranking wolf, would finally know what true leadership, tempered by justice and compassion, truly meant. The wind seemed to carry his renewed resolve through the ancient trees, whispering of an impending change that would shake the very foundations of the Silverwood pack. He pictured the day he would return, not as a lone wolf, but as a force for transformation, with Lyra, his quiet, powerful mate, standing proudly beside him. A new determination, sharp and focused, settled within Kale. He knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that he could no longer stand idly by, observing the accelerating decline of his ancestral pack. The Silverwood pack needed strong, just leadership, a guiding hand that prioritized the welfare of all its members, not just the powerful few. He envisioned a future where Lyra's compassionate influence, her innate connection to the natural world, and her hard-won wisdom would not just be valued, but would be absolutely vital in rebuilding the pack, in healing the deep wounds of injustice and neglect. Her spirit, so long suppressed, would be the balm the pack desperately needed. His plan began to take precise shape in his mind, meticulous and unyielding. He would orchestrate his re-entry, not as a desperate, vengeful exile returning to punish, but as a rightful leader asserting his domain, a leader armed with a vision for true unity and prosperity. The time for subtle observation was over. The time for decisive action had arrived. Every strategic move, every carefully considered step would be aimed at two goals: reinstating true justice within the Silverwood pack, and by doing so ensuring Lyra's rightful place by his side, not just as his mate, but as their revered Luna. He would return, and the Silverwood pack, from the lowest Omega to the highest-ranking wolf, would finally know what true leadership, tempered by justice and compassion, truly meant. The wind seemed to carry his renewed resolve through the ancient trees, whispering of an impending change that would shake the very foundations of the Silverwood pack. He pictured the day he would return, not as a lone wolf, but as a force for transformation, with Lyra, his quiet, powerful mate, standing proudly beside him. As if nature itself conspired with Kale's brewing determination, a harsh, unforgiving winter descended upon the Silverwood pack with a brutal intensity none had anticipated. The land was swallowed by deep snow, the rivers froze solid, and the biting winds howled relentlessly through the dense sights. This was no ordinary cold snap. It was a test of survival, a challenge that quickly exposed the gaping flaws in the pack's corrupted leadership. Their poor planning and arrogant disregard for traditional winter preparations left them catastrophically vulnerable. Food reserves, already dwindling from inefficient hunting in easier seasons, rapidly diminished. The once plentiful game had retreated or succumbed to the elements, leaving the pack's hunters returning with empty paws and desperate faces. Sickness, a silent predator, began to spread through the crowded dens, weakening the young, the old, and the already vulnerable. A bone-chilling cough became common, followed by fevers that stole strength and hope. The Silverwood Pack, once so proud and seemingly invincible, now faced genuine starvation, its members growing gaunt and listless, their howls turning into mournful whimpers. Damon, the alpha's son, whose arrogance had been so pronounced at the mating ceremony, proved utterly incapable of leading effectively in this crisis. His commands were haphazard, his hunts yielding little, and his focus remained stubbornly on maintaining his own comfort rather than addressing the desperate plight of the pack. The current alpha, too, seemed paralyzed by the sheer scale of the disaster, his authority waning with every empty belly and every wolf lost to the cold or hunger. Their reign, built on fear and superficial power, crumbled under the weight of true adversity. While the pack's leaders floundered, Lyra, an invisible beacon of strength on the fringes, found her knowledge and skills more vital than ever. Despite her outcast status, she could not ignore the suffering that permeated the air. Using her intimate understanding of forgotten foraging techniques and her vast knowledge of medicinal herbs, honed over years of solitary survival, she secretly began to help some of the sicker and weaker wolves. She moved like a ghost in the twilight hours, leaving small bundles of nutrient-rich roots and warming herbs near the dens where the sickest lay, careful not to draw attention to herself or risk the alpha's wrath. A hidden cave warmed by a small, carefully maintained fire became her secret clinic, where she would tend to the most desperate cases, often pups or elderly wolves, brought to her by sympathetic, albeit fearful, lower-ranking members of the pack. Her small, compassionate acts, performed in the shadows and whispered about only among those she helped, were literally saving lives. Each warm broth, each poultice applied, each fever patiently nursed, was an unacknowledged triumph, a testament to her spirit even as the official leaders of the pack proved their utter ineptitude. Lyra, the scorned Omega, was becoming the pack's silent healer, a lifeline in their darkest hour, her gentle touch and ancient wisdom proving far more powerful than any alpha's roar. Kale, observing the unfolding tragedy from his strategic vantage points, knew with a chilling certainty that the time was not just right, it was imperative. The pack's suffering had reached a critical point, their desperation a palpable thing that hung heavy in the frigid air. He could no longer delay. He had spent weeks gathering resources, meticulously planning his return, and most importantly reconnecting with a few loyal wolves from his exile. These were wolves who, years ago, had believed in his just leadership, who had quietly resented his banishment and the subsequent decline of the pack under the current alpha. They were grizzled veterans, disillusioned by the present state of affairs, and their loyalty to Kale was unwavering. With their silent, steadfast support, Kale made his final preparations. He would return not as a desperate refugee, but as a force for change, a leader reclaiming his rightful place. His return would not just be for Lyra, his mate, whose quiet heroism in the face of such suffering stirred him deeply, but for the entire pack, to pull them back from the precipice of ruin. He would bring justice, order, and compassion back to the Silverwood Pack, even if it meant a direct confrontation with the very wolves who had cast him out. The stage was set for a dramatic, inevitable reckoning. Kale and his small loyal group, their forms like shadows against the snow-laden landscape, arrived at the Silverwood Pack's main camp during a moment of profound despair and weakness. The air was thick with the stench of sickness, hunger, and a pervasive hopelessness. Gaunt wolves huddled together, their eyes dull, their once proud stances broken. The fire in the central clearing flickered feebly, mirroring the waning spirit of the pack. Kale's presence, powerful and commanding, radiated an authority that cut through the despondent silence like a blade. Every head snapped up, every pair of eyes fixed on the imposing figure that stood at the camp's entrance, an aura of undeniable leadership emanating from him. His golden eyes swept across the ravaged encampment, taking in the suffering, the neglect, the utter failure of the leadership that had replaced him. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound born of sorrow and simmering rage. The struggling pack, though wary, felt an almost instinctual pull towards this unexpected, formidable presence, a flicker of something they hadn't felt in months, a sliver of hope, however faint. He advanced slowly, his loyal wolves fanning out slightly behind him, their silent support a palpable force. His gaze landed on the current alpha, a once robust wolf now sunken and haggard, huddled near the meager fire. Kale's voice, deep and resonant, cut through the biting wind, carrying easily to every corner of the camp. Alpha, he began, his tone laced with a cold authority that brooked no argument. Look upon your pack. Look at what your leadership has wrought. His words were not a question, but an accusation, a direct challenge to the Alpha's crumbling authority. He cited the pack's suffering, the widespread sickness, the gnawing hunger that had become their constant companion. He spoke of the unjust treatment of its members, remembering Lyra's humiliation, though he did not yet name her. The Alpha, caught completely off guard, visibly flinched. His eyes, clouded with despair and fear, widened in disbelief upon recognizing the exiled Alpha from his past. His authority, already teetering on the brink, crumbled further under the weight of Kale's powerful presence and the undeniable truth of his words. The pack, witnessing this unprecedented confrontation, felt a jolt of something akin to electric current, a possibility stirring in the depths of their collective misery. From within the pack, a figure pushed forward, his face etched with a mix of defiance and waning arrogance, despite his own gauntness. It was Damon, the Alpha's son, still clinging to the vestiges of his former entitlement. He had recovered from the initial shock of Kale's sudden appearance and now sought to reassert his own diminished standing. "Who are you to question our Alpha?" Damon sneered, attempting to infuse his voice with the power he no longer possessed. "You are an exile, a forgotten shadow. You have no place here, challenging our leadership." He puffed out his chest, a pathetic attempt at bravado, hoping to rally some support, some affirmation of his own authority. However, Kale's formidable presence, combined with the profound desperation and suffering of the pack, made Damon's words fall flat, devoid of any real weight or conviction. The wolves glanced from Kale's imposing figure to Damon's posturing, and the contrast was stark, undeniable. Damon's attempts to mock Kale, to dismiss him, only highlighted his own impotence and the futility of his past cruelties. The pack knew, deep in their bones, that Damon had no answers for their current predicament, no solutions for their suffering. Kale merely regarded Damon with a piercing gaze, a silent assessment of the young wolf's hollow pride. The air crackled with unspoken tension, the weight of years of injustice and neglect converging in this frigid, desperate moment. The pack held its breath, awaiting Kale's next move, sensing that the very fate of the Silverwood pack hung in the balance. The Alpha, cornered and exposed, his authority shattered before his starving, questioning pack, had no choice but to accept Kale's challenge for leadership. The traditional rules of succession, though rarely invoked in such dramatic fashion, still held sway. This would not be a mere skirmish. It was a battle not just for dominance and control of the Silverwood pack, but for its very soul, its future, its entire identity. The air crackled with anticipation, a sudden desperate hope igniting in the eyes of the onlookers. This was the moment of truth, the ancient test of strength and spirit that determined who was truly fit to lead. Though not fighting herself, Lyra's presence at Kale's side was crucial. As the two Alphas prepared for their confrontation, Kale subtly drew her closer, a silent gesture of ownership and protection. She stood near him, her small form radiating a quiet strength that was a stark contrast to the Alpha's bluster and the pack's nervous energy. Her gaze, steady and unwavering, followed every movement, every shift in Kale's powerful frame. Her former tormentors, the wolves who had openly snickered at her humiliation, now watched her with a mixture of awe and trepidation. They noticed her newfound confidence, the almost regal bearing she adopted beside Kale, an undeniable glow emanating from her that defied her former status. Damon, in particular, watched her with a venomous glare, a flicker of something akin to fear now mingling with his deeply rooted resentment. Her presence was a silent declaration of Kale's intentions, a testament to his values, and a searing indictment of the Alpha's past actions. It was clear to all that Lyra was no longer the invisible Omega, but a significant figure in this unfolding drama. She represented the injustice that Kale had come to right, the compassion he sought to restore. Her quiet support was a powerful statement in itself, a silent promise of a more just future for all. The fight between Kale and the Alpha was fierce, a brutal display of primal power and honed skill. The aging Alpha, desperate to cling to his fading power, fought with a frantic ferocity, but it was no match for Kale's superior strength, his years of living independently in the wild having forged him into an apex predator of unmatched prowess. Kale moved with a fluid grace, each strike precise, each dodge effortless. He was stronger, faster, and possessed a clear-headed determination born not of ego, but of a deep-seated desire for justice and the welfare of his mate and pack. The alpha, weakened by his own neglect and the pack's decline, soon found himself overwhelmed. Kale defeated him decisively, pinning him to the snow-covered ground with a growl that vibrated through the very earth, leaving no doubt as to the outcome. The pack, witnessing the sheer, undeniable strength and the inherent justice in Kale's victory, let out a collective howl, a sound that was less of sorrow and more of profound relief, recognizing the true power and righteousness of their new leader. They readily accepted him, their desperate hearts reaching out for the promise of a new dawn. With Kale's decisive victory, a palpable shift rippled through the Silverwood pack. The defeated alpha, his spirit utterly broken, lay vanquished, and the entire pack, from the youngest pup to the oldest elder, instinctively understood the ancient law had spoken. Slowly, with a mixture of awe and trepidation, they began to kneel. First, the lower-ranking wolves, then the hunters, then the healers, their heads bowed low in submission, acknowledging Kale as their rightful alpha. It was a powerful, humbling spectacle, a collective act of deference to true leadership. Even Damon, his face contorted with a bitter cocktail of resentment and fear, was forced to kneel, his father, the former alpha, beside him, both confronting the stark, undeniable consequences of their past actions and their profound negligence. The proud, arrogant wolves who had once dominated the pack now found themselves prostrate before the very wolf they had exiled, and the Omega they had scorned. The air, once thick with tension, now hummed with a new, almost sacred silence, punctuated only by bowing heads and the rustle of fur against the snow. Kale surveyed the kneeling pack, his golden eyes sweeping over every bowed head, lingering for a moment on the former alpha and his son. He held the moment, letting the weight of his newly established authority settle upon them all. Then, in a firm, resonant voice that carried across the clearing, he addressed the pack, his tone leaving no room for misunderstanding. Before this pack can heal, before it can rise again, we must first confront the rot that festered within, he declared, his gaze locking directly onto Damon. At the last mating ceremony, one of our own, a gentle and kind spirit, was humiliated not by choice, but by cruel words and baseless scorn. He paused, allowing his words to sink in, drawing every wolf's attention to the now trembling Damon. Such arbitrary cruelty, such public shaming, will no longer be tolerated in my pack. No wolf shall ever again be diminished for their spirit, for their true worth. He paused again, letting the gravity of his statement hang in the frigid air. The shame that Damon had so readily inflicted upon Lyra was now reflected back tenfold upon him. A public humiliation before the very wolves who had once laughed with him. A deeply satisfying, albeit painful moment of poetic justice. Damon visibly recoiled, his face flushing crimson, his jaw tightening in impotent rage, but he remained kneeling, utterly powerless. Then, in a gesture that solidified his reign and reshaped the entire future of the Silverwood pack, Kale turned. His eyes, now softer but no less commanding, sought out Lyra, who stood a little apart, her heart pounding with a mixture of awe, relief, and dizzying disbelief. He offered her his paw, a silent invitation, a gesture that spoke volumes. Lyra, her own gaze unwavering, walked towards him, her steps growing firmer with each stride, a silent testament to the resilience that had brought her to this moment. She took his paw, and Kale gently pulled her to stand by his side, facing the kneeling pack. "This," he announced, his voice imbued with a deep, unwavering affection that resonated through the clearing, "is Lyra. My mate. My Luna." The words hung in the air, a thunderclap in the quiet. The pack, already stunned by Kale's victory, was now utterly speechless, a collective gasp rippling through their ranks. The Omega they had ostracized, the wolf they had deemed unworthy and unmatchable, the small quiet soul they had relegated to the fringes, was now standing proudly beside their powerful new alpha. She was their Luna, the queen of their pack, chosen not by ceremony, but by the undeniable will of their new leader, his pronouncement a clear and irrefutable decree. The implications were staggering, monumental, rewriting their entire understanding of status, worth, and justice within the Silverwood pack. The pack, though initially shocked into stunned silence by Kale's profound declaration, slowly began to process the monumental implications of Lyra's new and utterly unexpected status. A ripple of murmur spread through the kneeling wolves, a mix of awe, confusion, and a dawning uncomfortable understanding of their past mistakes. Faces that had once sneered at Lyra now regarded her with a mixture of desperate hope and profound regret. Some elders exchanged knowing glances, perhaps recalling ancient prophecies or the forgotten wisdom of true wolf nature. Younger wolves who had only ever known the alpha's rigid caste system now saw their entire worldview upended. The Omega, the lowest of the low, was now their Luna, standing proudly beside the most formidable alpha Silverwood had ever witnessed. It was a powerful, undeniable message delivered not with words, but with an act of profound, transformative love and justice. The sheer audacity of Kale's choice reverberated through every wolf, forcing them to confront their own complicity in Lyra's past suffering, to acknowledge the blindness that had permitted such cruelty within their ranks. With Lyra, his newly declared Luna, standing steadfastly by his side, Kale wasted no time in beginning the arduous task of re-establishing justice and fundamental fairness within the pack. His authority was unquestioned, his victory decisive, and his vision was clear. He implemented new rules, not through brute force or intimidation, but with a quiet, unyielding resolve that resonated with the pack's deep-seated yearning for order and stability. Central to his new decree was an emphasis on community, on mutual respect among all wolves, and most critically, on the unwavering protection of every single pack member, regardless of their past status or perceived weaknesses. He abolished the harsh distinctions that had marginalized Omegas, declaring that every wolf contributed to the pack's strength and well-being. He reinstated the ancient custom of communal decision-making for important matters, dissolving the alpha's absolute power and encouraging open communication. The pack, bruised and battered by years of neglect, responded slowly but surely to Kale's principled leadership, recognizing the authenticity in his actions and the genuine care he displayed for their collective future. Lyra's quiet counsel, often delivered with a soft touch or a subtle glance, further softened the hard edges of Kale's commands, ensuring that compassion remained at the heart of their new way of life. The consequences for Damon and his father, the former alpha, were swift and just, delivered with a precision that left no room for doubt or defiance. Kale stripped them of their influence, their positions of power dissolved, their voices silenced in the communal discussions. They were not exiled, for Kale believed in the redemptive power of contribution, but they were assigned duties that were commensurate with their past disrespect and their demonstrable failure of leadership. Damon, once the arrogant heir, was now assigned to the arduous task of continually patrolling the farthest, most perilous reaches of the territory, ensuring the safety of the very borders he had once neglected. His father, the former alpha, found himself relegated to the most basic of tasks, working alongside the Omegas he had once scorned, hauling wood, and maintaining the common areas. It was a public display, a resounding message to the entire pack, that under Kale's reign justice would be served and accountability would be paramount. There would be no special privileges for those who had abused their power, and every wolf, regardless of their lineage, would earn their place through honest contribution and respect for the pack's new, equitable laws. This decisive action solidified Kale's authority and began the slow, but essential process of rebuilding trust and restoring balance to the fractured Silverwood pack. The humiliation Damon inflicted was now his own. Lyra, once the scorned Omega, now stood at Kale's side, her small frame radiating a quiet strength that had been honed by years of adversity. As Luna, her gentle nature and deep wisdom, once dismissed as weaknesses, were now not only valued but actively sought out. She blossomed under Kale's unwavering respect, her voice, though soft, carrying immense weight in pack council. She became a compassionate leader, guiding the pack not with harsh commands, but with empathy and an innate understanding of each wolf's needs. Together, she and Kale steered the Silverwood pack towards a path of healing and unity, proving to every wolf that true strength lay not in dominance or fear, but in mutual respect, care, and the deep, unwavering bonds of community. Her experiences on the fringes gave her unique insight into the struggles of the most vulnerable, ensuring that no wolf would ever again suffer the isolation and indignity she had endured. She meticulously helped organize the distribution of resources, ensuring every pup was fed, every elder cared for, every sick wolf tended to. Lyra's quiet influence was a balm, soothing the pack's frayed nerves and stitching together the torn fabric of their social structure with threads of kindness and understanding. She encouraged open communication, fostered a sense of shared responsibility, and slowly, painstakingly, rebuilt the trust that had been eroded by years of tyrannical rule. Her presence was a living testament to Kale's vision, demonstrating to all that true leadership embraced all facets of its members, finding power in every wolf's unique contribution. Under the united leadership of Kale and Lyra, the Silverwood pack began to thrive once more, rising from the ashes of its near destruction. The harsh winter which had threatened to decimate them became a distant, painful memory, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and prosperity. Their hunting expeditions, now meticulously planned and executed with shared responsibility rather than competitive individual glory, were consistently successful. The pack's reserves of game and provisions grew steadily, ensuring that no wolf would face hunger again. Their alliances with neighboring packs, once strained or non-existent due to the former alpha's arrogance, were carefully rebuilt, strengthened by Kale's reputation for fairness and Lyra's diplomatic grace. The Silverwood pack, once a fractured and struggling entity teetering on the brink of collapse, now found unity and a profound sense of shared purpose. The laughter of healthy pups echoed through the revitalized dens, the howls of hunters rang with pride and fellowship, and the elders shared stories by warm fires, their eyes reflecting a newfound peace. The physical landscape of their territory began to reflect their internal transformation. Damaged dens were repaired, communal areas were kept pristine, and the borders were vigilantly, yet respectfully, maintained. Every wolf understood their role, felt valued, and contributed wholeheartedly to the pack's collective well-being. This was a pack reborn, a testament to the power of just leadership and compassionate guidance, transforming a community from one based on fear to one flourishing in harmony. Kale and Lyra's bond, the bedrock of the revitalized Silverwood pack, deepened with each passing day. Their partnership was not merely one of shared duties and responsibilities, but a profound connection forged in mutual respect, unwavering loyalty, and a deep unconditional love that transcended their individual pasts. Kale, fierce and protective, found solace and wisdom in Lyra's gentle spirit, while Lyra, once shy and withdrawn, drew immense strength and confidence from Kale's steadfast presence and his absolute belief in her. They were two halves of an essential whole, their strengths complementing each other perfectly. His strength lay in decisive action and strategic planning, hers in nurturing, understanding, and healing. Their life together was a testament to true mates finding each other against all odds, their love story unfolding as a powerful narrative of resilience, redemption, and the undeniable force of destiny. They shared quiet moments under the moonlit sky, discussing pack matters with intertwined paws, their scents mingling to form a comforting aura of unity and devotion. Their love radiated throughout the pack, setting an example for all, proving that the deepest connections were formed not by status or initial appearance, but by shared values, understanding, and an unshakable belief in one another. This was the true meaning of Luna and Alpha, a partnership that brought balance and prosperity to their world, a living dream. The Silverwood pack, under the visionary and collaborative leadership of Kale and Lyra, truly flourished, becoming a beacon of justice, compassion, and unwavering community in the often turbulent werewolf world. Their territory, once marred by signs of neglect and internal strife, now teemed with life and a palpable sense of peace. The dens were warm and bustling, the hunting grounds bountiful due and efficient management, and the borders were secure, patrolled by wolves who understood their duty to protect not just land, but every member of their extended family. Their tale resonated far beyond their own lands, whispered among traveling merchants and neighboring packs, a legend of an exiled Alpha and a scorned Omega who together rebuilt a failing pack into a thriving example of what true leadership could achieve. Lyra, once ridiculed and publicly shamed, was now revered. The humiliation she had endured at that fateful mating ceremony was not merely forgotten, it was replaced by a profound respect and an almost reverent admiration from every wolf in the pack. Her wisdom, her calm demeanor, and her unwavering empathy had become the cornerstone of their newfound prosperity. She moved through the camp with an undeniable grace, her presence bringing comfort and stability, her scent now recognized as the embodiment of their collective hope and security. Lyra, the Omega who had once hidden in the shadows, now stood tall and proud as the beloved Luna, Her journey a powerful, living testament to the indomitable strength of the spirit. Her transformation was not just physical, nor was it merely a change in her title. It was a profound metamorphosis of her very being. She had found her voice, once silenced by fear and convention, now used to champion the vulnerable and guide the strong. She had discovered her true power, not in physical prowess, but in her capacity for understanding, healing, and fostering unity. And in the most unexpected of circumstances, amidst the ashes of her deepest humiliation, she had found her mate, a fierce and just alpha who saw beyond her omega status to the true worth within her. Their bond was a tapestry woven from shared hardship, mutual respect, and an unshakable love that had defied all odds. She was no longer defined by the rejection she'd experienced but by the boundless love she now shared, by the thriving pack she helped nurture, and by the undeniable impact she had made on countless lives. Her story served as a timeless reminder that true worth is never determined by the superficial judgments of others, but by the quiet resilience, the inner fire, and the unwavering integrity of one's own spirit. She had shown them all that even from the lowest point, one could rise to become the guiding star, illuminating a path to a better future for everyone. Her soft smile, a reflection of profound peace, was a constant reassurance to all that justice, compassion, and love would always triumph. If Lyra's incredible transformation from a publicly humiliated Omega to the revered Luna of the Silverwood Pack inspired you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more epic tales of resilience, love, and triumph against all odds, and click here to watch our next captivating story.